This video is part 1 of the muscular system, covering structure and movement as well as some of the muscles that we will be covering in class. So be able to define muscle, origin, insertion, synergistic, antagonistic, tendon, fiber, recruitment, twitch, summation, motor unit, and tetanus, and be able to locate different muscles defined in bold. List the types of movement done by each muscle, and list the cellular components involved in muscle contraction. Here are some memes for your pleasure. In class, we'll be doing an activity where we get up and exercise some muscles. We may go to the gym and practice on some of the equipment, which has been fun in the past for some students. We will not be memorizing every muscle shown here, but we will be memorizing some of these. For your plans, make sure to memorize the pectoralis major, which draws arms forward and toward the body, the biceps, which bends the forearm at the elbow, the rectus abdominis, which compresses the abdomen, bends the backbone, and compresses the chest cavity, the quadriceps, which flexes the thigh at hips and extends the leg at knee, the trapezius, which lifts the shoulder blade, braces the shoulder, and draws the head back, the gluteus maximus, which extends the thigh and rotates the thigh laterally, and the gastrocnemius, which bends the lower leg at the knee and bends the foot away from the knee. To fully understand this, I recommend a visit to the gym and using their equipment to practice with these muscles. Who knows? Maybe you'll get a little bulk. Or who knows? Maybe you'll get sore and you'll remember these muscles even better. Bones have special attachment points, and these attachment points attach to tendons and will attach to skeletal muscles. The origin is the part of the muscle that joins to the bone and stays stationary, whereas the insertion is the attachment across a point that moves. So the origin for the biceps is at the scapula. When moving the arm, the scapula and the origin there will both stay stationary. The insertion is the attachment on the radius, and that is going to move the radius. So when the biceps muscle flexes, the scapula stays put and the radius moves. The origin is on the part that stays put and the insertion is on the part that moves. When considering muscles, we consider antagonistic and synergistic pairs. Muscles come in pairs that move bones in opposing directions. The biceps will pull the radius toward the scapula. The triceps will pull the ulna towards the scapula. And these two are going to be pulling the forearm in opposite ways, making them antagonistic muscles. Synergistic muscles are going to work together to create the same movement, albeit with finer grades. Consider the quadriceps group on the leg. All of them are going to work together, making the same movement, even though there are several different muscles involved in the quadriceps group. These are synergistic muscles. We're going to look at the structure here, but I want to note that we could get into a lot greater depth with the structure. We simply are not. To get in greater depth, feel free to contact me during office hours, or to search out other videos, or to read your book. There's a lot to go on here, but we're going to focus on some simple parts. First off, the connective tissue known as the tendon. The tendon connects the muscles to the bones, connecting the muscular system and the skeletal system via connective tissue. Another connective tissue is fascia, which goes around the muscle and binds the various muscle fascicles together. A muscle is the entire thing that is doing the same job and is made up of different fascicles, which are little bundles within there. And these bundles are bundles of fibers are individual cells. Within the individual cells, you can see these striations or stripes because skeletal muscle is striated. These striations are called sarcomeres. And you can see here the M lines, Z lines, and thick and thin filaments. The Z line bounds each end of a sarcomere and is where the actin filaments are connected to one another. The myosin filaments are not connected to one another, but are arranged here in the M line and surrounding area where it's a little darker. And these myosin filaments will bring the actin filaments closer to each other, shortening the sarcomere during muscle contractions. It is the shortening of all of the sarcomeres within the muscle fibers that is going to make the muscle contract, because as each fiber contracts, the fascicles contract. As the fascicles contract, the muscle contracts. Now, As far as the movement of this goes, we're going to look very broadly at the movement, specifically how ATP is required and how the contractions are organized. ATP is required in several different places. First off, establishing the resting potential of the cell requires a sodium-potassium ATPase. We'll cover this a little more during neurons, but suffice it to say, both neurons and muscles are charged cells that use a sodium-potassium ATPase to establish a resting potential of about -70 millivolts, which can then be depolarized to make a muscle contract. This is why electricity applied to muscles makes them contract, because it depolarizes the cell. Calcium, during this depolarization, will go out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is a part of the cell similar to an endoplasmic reticulum but full of calcium. We're not going to go in depth on this, but putting the calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum after a contraction requires ATP in the form of a calcium ATPase to pump calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Here, and in this diagram, you can see how ATP is used to move each myosin head back to the resting potential. So you have a high energy conformation at the top here and a low energy conformation at the bottom here. The high energy conformation is when the myosin head is attached to the actin filament, which causes the myosin head to pivot and move to make it go to a low energy conformation. To restore the low energy conformation to the to the high energy configuration, you need ATP to convert to ADP and phosphate, which gives off energy and brings it to that high energy configuration and allows it to contract. So every myosin head needs ATP to move it back to high energy, which means every time the muscle is contracting, you can look at all those myosin heads where those little purple things meet the orange things down there, the myosin heads and the actin filaments. All of those will require ATP to move. Well, how do muscles hold position for a long period of time? This is one of those good questions that I even have to look up from sometimes. Muscles hold position for long periods of time by switching between different filaments. So some of these filaments are going to be resting while others are going to be pulling, and they hold position by switching which ones are resting and which ones are pulling while maintaining the same isometric force. And this isometric force will require you to continually burn ATP while holding position, because you are continually moving those myosin bridges back into the high energy configuration. This is why holding position, such as planking, takes a lot of energy, even though it feels like your muscles are not moving. Muscle contraction. So muscle contraction occurs when a signal comes from a nerve and tells a muscle to contract, which shortens the sarcomere as the myosin binds to the actin and slides it. This single cycle of myosin binding to actin, sliding it, and then releasing it is called a twitch, which is the single cycle of contraction and relaxation. If another stimulus comes to the muscle before it fully relaxes, you get this summation of multiple nerve impulses causing a greater amount of muscle force. This plateaus when the muscle cannot relax between stimulations and causes tetanus. So if you were to quickly move your arm up and down using your biceps, that is a twitch. If you were to hold it for slightly longer, that is summation. And if you were to lock it in at a certain position, that would be tetanus. So how do you control the level of strength? If the Incredible Hulk picks up a penny, how can he not toss it into orbit by flexing all of the muscles at once? Well, that is because he does not engage all of his motor units. A motor unit is a neuron and all the muscle cells that it controls. Here we see a certain neuron controlling several different muscle fibers. This means that when the neuron fires, it makes all of those muscle fibers fire. You make more of these motor units recruited when you try to flex a muscle harder. So when a Hulk picks up a penny, he'll recruit only 1 or 2 motor units. But when he tries to pick up a boulder, he's going to recruit even more motor units. So the recruitment of more motor units will increase the muscular strength that is being given.